Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome back to our Eureka from Scratch series. Now, if you missed the first video, we're basically doing the Eureka content from Stormblood all over again. And all over again means getting to elemental level 60, which is the maximum elemental level in there, and finishing a relic, at least up to and before the Baldessian Arsenal stage. We'll see about actually doing BA towards the end of the series. Main reason we're doing this is because it's old content, so some people think you can't really do it anymore, but I've been having a blast doing it, and I'm sharing my experience with you so you can know about how long you might expect it to take, at least if you're following my series and my advice. So towards the end of part 1, we approach the second zone in Eureka, Pagos. This is one of the most hated zones and one of the most hated content releases in Final Fantasy XIV history. There's tons of people who I bet if you go to the comment section, they'll be like, nah, I stopped doing this in Pagos, so let's see what we've got here. And you know what? Pagos only took me about 9 to 10 hours to get to max elemental level, which is 35 for this zone, and to finish the Pagos Relic step. Now, it took me like 3-4 hours longer than Onimos did, but considering Pagos' reputation, that's not bad at all. And I'm going to tell you what I did to get that done and how long you could expect it to take, because I obviously have the knowledge of having done it before, so it's a bit easier for me, but let's get to it. Actually, before we go any further, I do have a correction from part 1, and it's going to bug me if I don't mention it. In part 1, I mentioned that you get the fairy EXP buff permanently, so that hunting the fairies was only really going to give you that damage buff in the regen. You do get a permanent EXP buff in all the Eureka zones now, but the fairies still give another EXP bonus on top of that. So you definitely want to track down a fairy as soon as you get into a zone for the damage buff, the regen, and that bonus EXP. Now, with that clarification, approaching Pagos. This zone is known for being grueling to the player. The mob density is higher, the mobs are more threatening, there's narrow corridors where you have to sneak past incredibly dangerous enemies, and quite frankly, it's just an overall pain to get around this area. But does that really change my approach to it? Not so much. My actual approach to finishing Pagos was as simple as Onimos, just with a little bit of extra stuff at the end. So continuing from part 1, I was grinding mobs that were 2 levels over me as often as possible. Again, with the Kieran's Osode or the Vermilion Cloak plus the Magicite in offense, I rarely had any issue. There were some points in Pagos where I considered running 4 in offense and 1 in defense, but because I was playing a ranged DPS, I could always kite enemies to get a little bit of extra safety. If you feel threatened, don't feel bad going to 4 offense, 1 defense, but you should be okay in 5 offense with some potions and a bit of pacing, watching the enemies, stunning them, doing anything to reduce your damage taken. And on top of that, Notorious Monsters, they're still great for leveling, way better than they were when you may have done Pagos initially, and they're going to be really important towards making a relic, again, for quite a few reasons. Now, one thing that is very different in Pagos is that under certain conditions, enemies may mutate or adapt. Mutated monsters transform into new monsters entirely, changing their elemental affinity. They also have a chance of dropping cold warped lockboxes, which have very rare items that you might be able to make a little bit of gil off of. Now, adapted mobs actually retain their elemental affinities but become much stronger, and both adapted and mutated mobs are worth significantly more EXP, so as long as you won't die fighting them, they're generally a good thing to encounter. Another new thing is a new type of encounter called an elemental conflict, where happy bunnies will, and I'm not kidding, will need defending against the local wildlife. There are 2 of these on the map, with the southern set of bunnies being completed by players on the regular. The northern one most of the time gets left alone. When the encounter completes, players in the area get a happy bunny that guides them towards buried treasure all over the map, often in very dangerous locations. This treasure can also be worth a lot of gil though. Now, something that's not really new to Pagos, but I really want to make mention of it more in this video, is aggro types. Now, this actually exists in the main game itself outside Eureka, but in Pagos itself, it became way more important to understand how these aggro types work and how the game expects you to interact with them. I did make a video in the past about this, but we're going to recap them right now because it's way more important in Pagos. Now, most enemies with eyes have sight aggro. Makes sense. This means that they only attack if you walk directly in front of them. It's generally worth it to just always try to walk behind enemies when exploring in Eureka, even if you're just walking through a pack of wild bears. Now, enemies without eyes and also other special types of enemies have sound aggro. This means that if you run by them at normal speed, mounted or not, they will aggro you. Now, you can actually just toggle walk speed to sneak past them even while mounted. In Pagos, you need to do this because there's sleeping dragons that are closing off chokeholds, as well as enemies such as slimes and sanctinis that will also aggro you en masse if you do not walk by them. Undead enemies have blood aggro. This means that if you're missing a significant portion of health, they will attack you. Pretty much every undead has this. Some also have sight and sound, but most of them just have blood aggro, so just don't be low health by them. Elementals have magic aggro. Simply put, if you cast a spell near them, they'll attack. Weapon skills and abilities are fine, but spells will specifically get you. Finally, one that's kind of BS is touch aggro. Sometimes when you're just walking through the hitbox of an enemy, just attacks, regardless of what the monster normally does. Try to avoid ever walking directly through an enemy's hitbox. It appears to happen more often on non-sight enemies, and it also appears to happen more often if you have a pet out, or at least that was the case back before 5.0. I'm not sure with the way pets are done now, if that's actually going to change, but just try to avoid it. It's better off safe than sorry. Now with that knowledge, a reminder again that Pagos itself is quite mob dense. The southern half of the area has an aetheryte at level 21 just east of the base camp, and the northern half has a level 23 aetheryte in the northwest corner and a level 25 aetheryte in the top right corner. Now when you hit level 25, it is essential that you complete all of your quests at the base camp, and it's very important to get all 3 aetherytes so that you can get to any notorious monsters that appear. The main reason you want to get to all of them is because of how you upgrade your relic. Now with your finished Anemos relic, you'll be able to upgrade it to a Pagos weapon, and for this you'll need 3 things. The first one is 500 Pagos crystals. These drop from notorious monsters so long as you are within 1 level of them. So as long as you're level 34, you can get Pagos crystals from any enemy in the zone. Expect acquisition of these to be slow at first, but it'll speed up as you get more levels and do more notorious monsters. The second thing you'll need is 5 Louis Ice. Like Pazuzu, Luigi is the final boss of Pagos, but this time you need 5 items instead of 3. Fortunately, you can exchange 50 Pagos crystals for a single Linguini Ice. If you were to never get any ice from Louis himself, you'd end up needing 750 Pagos crystals instead of 500. Louis also only drops 2 ice per kill, but does also drop 40 crystals, so he's effectively like 140 crystals worth when you're working on a relic. Finally, you need frosted protean crystals. These can be obtained after you finish the level 25 quest, which you should prioritize immediately. This allows you to start generating light in your duty list. You get a little bar and it'll fill up whenever you get a message like you've obtained gentle light or feeble light or bright light. It's going to be hard to miss after you do it a couple of times. Now you earn these lights by killing monsters that reward experience points or attending notorious monsters. Elemental conflicts aren't going to give you any light. Now different monster types actually reward different amounts of light. Undead and elementals reward way more light than other types of monsters, as do some of the tougher basic enemies like the sleeping dragons. Mutated and adapted mobs also always reward light, but it's often much less than the mob can normally give, trading the consistency of getting light in exchange for, a chance at a lot of light. Notorious monsters also reward significant light, especially once you are within range to get full experience points from the higher level ones. For Pagos in particular, bit of advice. There's one notorious monster set called Brothers, which is just 2 minotaurs that you'll have to fight at the same time. They cast an ability called Blood Brothers, which mutates the other Minotaur. Do not silence this. Letting them mutate makes the fight give more EXP and light at the end. So do not silence Blood Brothers. Now I did release a video some time ago showing a way you can abuse level syncing in a bunny fate or a notorious monster encounter to generate tons of bonus light. That method still works, but people actually complete the bunny fates far more often, so most of the time it's going to be a lot tougher to do this method. If you want to check it out, it's in the playlist in the description, the easy way to farm light video, but mind you that if people are completing the bunny fate, they're not going to stop just so you can do this. Now, once you've actually generated some crystals in this flask, you actually need to go to a furnace that's a bit out of the way. Now, you can store up to 9 light crystals, so if you're ever at 9, honestly, I'd empty it before even getting to 9, maybe empty it at like 7 or 8. You're gonna have to do this. Go to the northwest aetheryte and drop down off the cliff to the south onto a ledge. Sneak past a sleeping dragon and into a room with a ton of Rafflesias to find a furnace. Upon interacting with the furnace, you will extract the crystals that you've earned and it'll be reset to 0 so you can generate more. In total, you need 31 of these frosted protean crystals. I managed to have almost all of them by the time I hit 35 with a combination of doing my light trick for a little bit on that bunny fate and honestly just going to every NM possible once I hit 25. Just going to all of them gets you light from every single one. You're gonna need Pagos crystals, you're gonna need experience. make an effort to get to all of them and learn the aggro type so you don't die getting there. And that's all I did. I did grinding on mobs, I tried to spawn NMs, and I went to every NM post level 25. If I could, I abused the bunny fate trick. I think I was only able to do that reliably for like 45 minutes to an hour, but I got a lot done in that time. There are also other objectives in Pagos, such as farming the mutated mobs or the bunnies, and like I mentioned earlier, you can make some really good gil from Pagos, Pyros, and Hydatos, the upcoming zones, if you want to do this stuff. There's also Eureka armor pieces in here that are really strong, kind of like your Kirin Osod or Vermilion Cloak. King Arthur drops a speed belt, Copycat Cassie drops Cassie earrings, and if you obtain and craft a Hakutaku eye cluster, you can get an optical hat from the Hakutaku boss. But these chop rates are insanely low, so I wouldn't focus on this unless you plan to go hardcore Eureka. So with that, we're about 15 to 16 hours total into our Eureka adventure, and we're already kind of halfway done. The next two zones, I have to figure out exactly how I'm going to approach them, but I can tell you right now that in the next zone, Pyros, I've already hit the max elemental level there at 50, and I'm working on obtaining Pyros crystals and the items I need from the final boss. We will touch on that a lot because Pyros has a lot of new stuff added on top of what Pagos already had, so it's probably going to be one of the longer videos. And with that, that's going to be a wrap for my second video in Eureka from scratch. Be sure to check that playlist. A lot of that old information is still relevant, even if you have to completely ignore when I say how long it takes to do things, because it's obviously way quicker now. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for 14 news and videos and all that good stuff. I'll see you guys in the next one. And until then, take care.